Hello and welcome to a video that I have put off for far too long. At the start of the year, I hopped on the trend of making a resolution bingo, which I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do a great job at keeping up with, but I do really like the concept and I'll probably do it again next year. One of the things on the list was to do some fabric stash busting and use up my already owned fabric instead of buying new stuff. To be fair, I did make a cosplay out of fabric I already owned and I upcycled some of my old t-shirts. But also, this year a major fabric retailer went out of business, and if you think I would miss out on a liquidation sale for fabric, you would be dead wrong. So needless to say, I have accumulated a bit of fabric. Some of it was purchased, some of it is leftovers from other cosplays, and a decent helping of it has actually handed down to me by my sister or my mother, who also loved to sew in her spare time and also struggles to let her fabric scraps go. And it needed to be sorted and folded badly. So my first step was getting my scraps organized by size, and I ended up with 4-ish different categories. The first pile I left out of the boxes. These are my biggest rolls of fabric. These are all at least 1.5 yards or more of fabric each. I put them around old fabric bolts, cardboard squares, and also some cardboard boxes that I cut up and taped into some makeshift fabric bolts. The second pile was a box of any fabric scrap that was somewhere between half a yard to a full yard, something that was kind of cut into an odd shape, but still had enough length that I could probably cut something significant out of it without struggling too much. The third pile is a little more loosey-goosey. It's any piece of fabric that I felt like I could cut anything at all out of. Maybe if I wanted to do something patchwork or quilted, or something that I could maybe make a dice bag or a pocket out of. And the final pile was little scraps and shreds of fabric that were kind of ruined and weird, and I didn't feel confident that I could get anything out of, and so most of this I'm just saving as material to be used as stuffing. It's pretty easy to come up with something to do with a bigger swath of fabric if I want to make some kind of clothes or part of a cosplay, but it's the third category specifically, too big to use as stuffing but too small to make anything that isn't patchwork. It's a little more difficult to handle. So to remedy this issue, I have decided to combine my love of collecting dice with my husband's hatred of uncomfortable throw pillows and make a throw pillow that is also a D20. Lucky for us, the pattern for a D20 pillow is really simple, since a D20 is made of, believe it or not, 20 equilateral triangles. So you can make your triangle pattern piece as big or as small as you want. Just make sure that number 1, all the sides of said triangle are the same length, and number 2, you take into account a seam allowance when figuring out what size you want your pillow to be. If you want your pillow to look relatively similar to mine, the triangle pattern piece I made was 6 inches on each side. Personally, in terms of usability as like a pillow, I would have preferred it to be a little bigger than that, but that being said, since this was specifically a scrap busting project, this triangle was pretty much the perfect size for using all of my weird odds and ends pieces. When I first went into this project, I really thought I would come out of the other end with like a red and black D20, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that I had a lot of green. Also, seeing all the different pieces was kind of cool and nostalgic. I have bits here from a tabard I made for my partner, green velvet from a cape that I made ages ago, a dark green satin that I think I used to make a dice bag at some point, and then of course most of the scraps were these sage-ish green, which are all from my Fern Calloway cosplay. And then of course, once I had my 20 pieces cut out and ironed nice and flat, I went on to serging all my edges so they wouldn't fray. An overlocking machine is a huge help in any sewing project, but if you don't have one, there are a lot more cost-effective options than going out and buying a whole new machine. If your sewing machine has a zigzag stitch setting, which many modern ones do, that's a great alternative to serging that works on most fabric types. Also, maybe getting yourself those zigzag pinking shears that can help with fraying, or just invest a little money in some fray check glue to use on edges. These are all very valid alternative options. I'm sure there are many more out there. Just make sure that the option you're choosing is compatible with the fabric you're working with. I've heard fray check stains some kinds of fabrics and that a zigzag stitch doesn't work with brocades, but you know, just do a swatch test. So this next bit I was kind of torn on whether or not I should do, because the fabric itself is really pretty and I wasn't sure if I wanted to ruin it with sad, crooked, hand-painted numbers, but I think I decided at the end of the day, it being somewhat functional as dice had pretty strong appeal to me, so I broke out my fabric paint pen. There are a lot of alternate options to this. You could embroider, you could do some iron-on decal situation, you can put your numbers any way you want, or you don't have to put numbers at all, but this is just what I did. I didn't draw directly with my pen onto the fabric, I just deposited some of the liquid into a cup and then used a brush to paint that on. I feel like this gave me more control, especially for the fabrics that seem to wick up the solvent and cause the paint to bleed a lot, but that could have just been me convincing myself that the extra stuff was worth it. At the end of the day, the most important thing is, like I said, do some swatch tests. Whatever you're using to make your numbers, make sure it works with the fabric that you're using. Speaking of fabric, I maybe should have mentioned the importance of choosing your fabric types a little earlier. To be so clear, it's a pillow, it's a plushie, so I fully understand if you want to use a soft, more squishy fabric for it. That being said, if you want to have flat faces and you don't want your D20 to just turn into a round ball when you stuff it, you are going to want to choose fabrics that are a little more structured or that just don't have a lot of stretch to them. If you really want a specific fabric for your outside and you're worried it might be too stretchy, I've seen it recommended online to use some fusible interfacing or to attach your fabric to some kind of felt to help create more structure. I didn't do that, so I cannot personally attest to the success of that, but it sounds like some pretty good options to me. At the start, when I was trying to figure out my numbers and which pieces should line up to where, I was referencing a real D20 and turning it over in my hands, checking off numbers on a list. But to me, what turned out to be easiest was finding a template online for a flattened D20, like a papercraft D20, and then arranging my pieces and working on numbers like that. It also made it easier for me to plan my pieces such that no two of the same fabric types would be touching, and I could have my different fabrics evenly dispersed throughout the project. And once I had my pieces laid out and my numbers all accounted for, it was time to begin sewing a bunch of little straight lines. I didn't do a perfect job of this at all. I'm sure someone out there who is more of a perfectionist than I am will have some strong words about how my points line up, but equally on the other hand, I feel like this is a good sign for people who are a little more casual about sewing or who are fairly new to sewing. It's a bunch of short straight lines with a little bit of seam pressing. And even if your work isn't perfect, the final result is still pretty satisfying. So I ended up sewing everything together except for one edge of one triangle so that I still had room to turn the piece right side out and have a spot where I could put the stuffing in. If you have a bigger piece, you might be able to leave less than a whole edge open, but if you're making a smaller pillow, it might get a little hard to turn it inside out without leaving more space open, but it really doesn't matter just so long as there's enough room for you to turn your piece right side out and put some stuffing inside. One thing that I didn't do that I wish I had done was take the time to trim at least a little bit of the fabric off at the bulky points where the triangle corners meet. That way they poke out a little bit nicer. But you know what? It's all part of a learning process here. This is my first time making a D20 pillow as well. For stuffing my pillow, I'm using a combination of polyfill, memory foam, and fabric scraps because that's what I had in my house. If you like yarn crafts, I'm sure yarn tail ends would make great stuffing. I've seen people stuff pillows with old clothes. Honestly, I'm sure just plain fabric scraps would be just fine, and I don't think having polyfill or memory foam is necessary at all. I do think you do have to be careful when it comes to filling things with scrap fabric because depending on the kind of fabric scraps that you have, it can get really dense and heavy. For me, I had recently made a Halloween costume for a friend, and part of that costume had like a thick canvas material, and that was very much at the top of my scrap bin. So my D20 pillow is a little more solid than you might expect. Once the pillow has my desired stuffedness, I pin the open edge together and hand sew the seam shut. Do not look at it, do not perceive it, do not witness it. I am very bad at basic hand sewing. I'm aware of it, we don't need to confront it, I already know. A potential alternative to hand stitching this clothes would be top stitching all the edges. I think you could do it. It would be kind of tedious and kind of difficult, but it might make your D20 more D20 shaped. But again, I haven't tried it myself. It sounds a little complicated, so don't take my word for how successful that would be. But with that, congratulations, you have successfully made a D20 pillow plushie thingy. Ta-da! I didn't make a reveal montage for this because I thought it would be a little bit silly. I don't know, it just felt a little over dramatic to make a whole thing about it. But here it is. It rolls, it kind of lands on individual sides. At the end of the day, it's what I wanted it to be. It's a usable, semi-functional, sort of unbalanced D20 pillow. And even so, I really love it. Especially for something that took me a couple hours from start to finish to come up with and then put together. It did not even take me half a day to make this. It's not perfect by any means. I'm sure if I took a little more time it would be a little nicer, but also I didn't really expect it to be perfect. I know I'm not the most patient person when it comes to sewing, so I would never say that sewing is something I'm good at, but I am foolhardily ambitious, so, you know, there's that. But I guess this is just proof that you don't really have to be good at something to make something that's kind of cool. You just have to make it. I think this would be great at like an in-person game night. I've already brought it to a place where it was subjected to the terrors of 6 and 7-year-olds, and it held up pretty well. I think the best part of it, especially at this size, it just feels so throwable. Like, I think this would be very satisfying to just chuck at an unsuspecting sibling or something like that. I just think that would be fun. But now that I've made this, I'm kind of at an impasse because I could do two things. I could continue going through my scraps bin and make, you know, a bunch more D20s in different colors, or I could see if I can find more of these specific colors to make an entire matching set of dice, like D4s, D6s, D8s, so on and so forth. I think that would be very cool. This is a very tough decision, and you know what? At the end of the day, I'm a very indecisive person, so who knows? Not me.